So hi, welcome. My name is Lauren Hansen, and I am the development officer here at Every Shelter. And I just want to thank you guys. Thank you all so much for being here, spending your Saturday evening with us. Before we jump in, I just wanted to give just a few housekeeping kind of suggestions for the night. First of all, in the unfortunate reality that you get knocked off of this webinar, do not fear. There is an easy way to get back on. You can go to the Eventbrite link that you found in your email. All you have to do is to find that Zoom link. Just get right back on and you'll be able to catch up. And don't worry if you miss anything. Again, you'll be getting a recording. Or you can look at the email that I sent you this afternoon with the Zoom link. So if you do get knocked off, it's okay. Just try to find that Zoom link again and get back on. And then also, we are going to be doing a live Q&A here tonight. And so if you during this presentation, if you think of a question, please go ahead and type that into our Q&A box. And at the very end, I will direct your question to the appropriate person. And also, we have a chat feature where you'll be able to find our links for being able to donate tonight. So let's get started. Gonna just check to see if I got any more people. Got a few more. Okay, let's go ahead and jump right in. So today is World Refugee Day, and World Refugee Day is an international day of observance held every June 20th, and it's a day dedicated to raising awareness of the situations of refugees throughout the world. And tonight we hope to do that. We hope to raise awareness, but also to share what Every Shelter has done so far to help refugees and what we hope to do to improve the situation for refugees throughout the world. So tonight, you guys are all going to hear from our 4 co-founders, who are Sam Brizadine, Julia Wallen, Nicole Iman, and Scott Key. And then we are going to end the night hearing about how you can help us again. So let's get started. First, tonight we're going to hear from Sam Brizadine, who is our co-founder and is one of our board members here at Every Shelter.
Hi, I'm Sam Brizendine, and I'm a co-creator of Emergency Floor and co-founder of Every Shelter, and now I'm a board member. And this all started when Scott and I met in grad school and came up with Emergency Floor. And early on in our research, when we were looking into shelter products, we learned pretty quickly that outdated, archaic solutions continue to go out into the field. We're talking about tents that were designed after the First World War, old tarp technologies, and that the organizations that administer relief programs, they're just not equipped to come up with new solutions, or they're unwilling to take the risk. And so predictably, Emergency Floor encounter resistance. But the good news is that because of people like you, right, our donors and our supporters in the community, our successful Indiegogo campaign in 2015 transformed what was just a student idea into a tested real world product. And we funded that project with the help of a USAID grant that provided much needed floors to families in need, and we started building credibility within the region. And our work there was, featured in numerous publications, Forbes and Fast Company. And our floors are actually still in use in Lebanon today from the floors that were funded from the 2015 campaign, which is pretty crazy when you think about it, that they're still there, and we think that's really exciting. And we hope that you do too. So after seeing the impact that good design can have through our work with Emergency Floor, we knew that we wanted to do more in different ways, new products. And so we joined forces with Julie and Nicole, who both have background in humanitarian work, to form Every Shelter. We took that model that we had developed and created our nonprofit. And every shelter exists for this sort of story. And our most important work is made possible by the community that supports us. That's you. We are so pleased to have you join us tonight, and we're excited to share what we've been doing this year and the next journey that we would like to invite you on with us. So now I'm going to turn it over to my co-founder and Every Shelter Chief Operations Officer, Julia Wallen, to help set the stage for our discussions with a firsthand account of what daily life can feel like in a refugee camp.
Thank you, Sam. Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Wallen, and as Sam mentioned, I am a co-founder and the Chief Operating Officer at Every Shelter. I came to Every Shelter with over a decade of experience working as a humanitarian and emergency relief professional. I've done many things in that context, from supporting refugee women in establishing multiple social enterprises, as well as managing multi-million-dollar US and foreign government aid portfolios. Been in places like India, Syria, Gaza, and most recently Afghanistan. My passion has always been community-led development and leadership. So I joined Every Shelter because I saw a unique opportunity to partner private sector efficiency, resources, and design with persistent humanitarian needs. I knew that there could be a better way for us as a global community to do more and to give us more strategically when we engage in humanitarian response. And I want to help create it. So at Every Shelter, what we want to do is we want to ensure that everything we do is ultimately focused on supporting and elevating refugees and displaced persons. UNHCR actually just released their new numbers this week, and nearly 80 million people are currently displaced around the world. This is a global record. Another person is displaced every 2 seconds. So I think it's really important as we go into this that we can connect with that experience. So I'd like to ask you to get up off your chair and join me on sitting on the ground. I'm actually sitting here with my dog in case he comes on the screen. Anyway, as we sit here, I want to lead you in a reflection that discusses the experience of being a refugee in a refugee camp. This reflection was inspired by my refugee sister, Marwa, in a refugee camp in Jordan. The sentiments and the emotions are her own, but the words have just been repackaged for this context. So please join me and close your eyes, and I will take you through this experience. The couple in the adjacent tent is fighting again. It seems as predictable as the turning hand on Grandma's old silver watch. The same watch you smuggled out of Syria in the bottom of your bag, wedged between the folds of an old hijab, where hopefully, if you were looted or robbed, it would lay undetected. Grandma was too old to make the journey over the mountains, so Dad stayed back while you, Mom, and your 4 younger siblings followed a half-beaten trail up and down the jagged face of Jebel Bishri. For what? This tent? This tent next to the predictable cadence of a predictable fight of a predictable day? It's been 3 years since that terrible journey to safety. Your thoughts turn back to your neighbor's argument. Food. It's always about food. Unless, of course, it's about shelter. Today, it's actually both. The husband wants to sell part of their food ration on the black market. He wants to buy a new tarp. It's the rainy season, and theirs has ripped. The newborn is getting wet. It's dangerous, he says. But we must eat, she replies. We can't reduce our intake more. I am his food, the woman pleads. Motherhood. You think of your own mother, choosing to sleep under the broken seam of your own tarp, frequently awaking on damp, muddy ground. all so that the young children can stay dry. Is this what motherhood is? Physically sheltering against the elements? You're not sure. But this time in life seems to be an empty limbo, where you must make a lot out of a little. You must turn rations into shelter and sacrifice meals into enough. You wonder if anyone knows that you are here, that you are alive. It's as if the only thing progressing is your age. Everything else is going backwards. Will you too one day become a mother? Will you too one day become a human shelter? You wonder, but mostly, you just wonder if anyone knows you are here.
They're given don't last. Families are effectively forced to camp for years with materials that fail within months, and the human toll is great. Imagine raising your kids in a home with leaky tarps and muddy floors. It will be the only home some children know. Already limited aid money is wasted on replacing these failed materials rather than creating new solutions. Let's be clear, what happens now for these families will have decades-long ramifications. It's time for change. It's time to act. Every Shelter designs and delivers shelter solutions with and for refugees. Partnering with refugee relief organizations, Every Shelter's mission is to use the power of design to help displaced communities advance from surviving to thriving. And we're just getting started. Join us. Help us lead innovation and build the solutions refugees need to stabilize, flourish, and thrive.
Thank you, Julia, for leading us through that powerful exercise. Now, I welcome all of you to return to your couches or chairs for the rest of the evening if you did manage to get onto the floor. And thank you to Gentry Wilson of Gentry Faith Films for creating that wonderful video of our work using actual footage from our project site. My name is Nicole Iman, and I'm also one of the co-founders and the director of communications for Every Shelter. I live in the United Arab Emirates, which is on the Arabian Peninsula. So outside of this global pandemic with heavy travel restrictions, I usually have easy access to visit our project site and continue building close relationships with the refugees that we work with and with our implementing partners throughout the Middle East. And I just want to start out also myself, thank you for joining us tonight, especially on a Saturday evening. I know a lot of things are opening up in the US right now. There's more options for how to spend your Saturday night than is just another Zoom call. So thanks for giving us your time. We're excited to share with you the very early stages of this new innovation that we are developing that we know is going to have a really significant global impact. And to set the stage for that, I want to share a little bit more with you about Emergency Floor. It's a simple but totally new product to use in humanitarian response, and it has already had a major impact thanks to the support of your support of its development and implementation. So for those of you who are new to our organization's work, a quick review. Emergency Floor is the product Sam mentioned earlier that started our existence as an organization. It's insulated, lightweight, a modular flooring system. It's specially designed to be really easy to install and to uninstall for families that are on the move. And it is the only product of its kind because it's insulated to better regulate the temperature inside of shelters and give a clean and a dry living space to displaced families who would otherwise be living on the bare ground for for decades. So what started in 2016 with 2 students and one simple product has now developed into a full-fledged nonprofit that is expanding to reach the lives of thousands of refugees and displaced people worldwide. So because of your unceasing support, since 2016, we have been able to provide emergency floor to 8,825 refugees living in over 1,500 households. And to do this, we've formed partnerships with 7 international and local humanitarian organizations, and they're the ones to install the flooring in the camps that they manage. Now, most of the projects we've done so far have been in northern Lebanon. It's in a region called Ka, up near the Syrian border. And here, the weather is very harsh. It's hot in the summer, it's cold and snowy in the winter, and refugee settlements are very isolated with limited access to resources. The Syrian refugees living in the camp pictured here have been living in these shelters for at least 6 years, most of them much longer. They have no other flooring to get them through this cold and mud. When I first visited this camp in 2018, as you can see here, I had to wear plastic bags on my feet to keep from spreading mud inside the shelters as the snow melted and the camp flooded. But thanks to your support over the last few years, we were able to give the gift of warm and clean flooring to about 40 of the most vulnerable households in this camp earlier this year. Also earlier, I guess last year, we provided flooring to homes in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh. This is where 1 million displaced Rohingya refugees are living in horribly crowded conditions. The hillside you see pictured here used to be a protected forest reserve. And within the scope of just months, they were totally deforested to accommodate 1 million people. And Bangladesh has really harsh and wet monsoon season. So what looks like dusty hillsides here transforms to just pure mud during the weeks of torrential rain. So the partners we worked with in Bangladesh worked really hard to identify out of these million people, some of the most vulnerable households who really needed flooring the most. The family pictured here is the Nur Nahar family. This mother, along with 1 million other refugees, gathered these children here with her, the few belongings that she could carry, and they fled unimaginable violence in Myanmar to search for safety and end up in these crowded hillside camps. So in this family with 5 children, you'll see the eldest and the third son are suffering from chronic disease that's leading to paralysis. And our NGO partners are working with them to meet all their health and their nutritional needs. And part of that plan has included using emergency floor. They lift these children who literally spend all day at home on the ground, out of the dirt and onto a dry and a comfortable floor. And right now, Bangladesh is suffering from the early stages of a COVID-19 outbreak right in the middle of monsoon season. So this family at least has a place where they can stay dry and keep this floor where they spend so much of their time sanitized and clean. Everywhere that we implement emergency floor, we survey and we talk to the recipients, we collect data, we get people's feedback to see what we need to do better, how to improve, and how it's impacting their lives. From hundreds of surveys collected, refugees are reporting to us that emergency floor really makes a drastic difference in their health and their quality of life. Before emergency floor, almost all of the respondents said that their shelters were hard to clean, uncomfortable, did not provide decent life conditions. After emergency floor, 95% say their shelter is comfortable and decent. 88% say it's easy to clean and it has a significant impact. Also, as you'll see here on their health, a 46% reduction in diarrhea and a 91% reported improvement in sleep, which also has major impacts on health, this quality of sleep. So thanks to, it's just mind-blowing, this one simple basic intervention, adding a floor, something that is not standard in most refugee camps and responses, leads to 8,000 refugees in Lebanon and Bangladesh living happier, healthier, more comfortable lives despite facing a very difficult situation and unknown future. And we're focused on continuing to expand this impact to more people and more countries. So even as we're turning our attention to a new innovation, which I promise we're about to get to, my role here is to continue building partnerships in this region and expanding the role and the impact of emergency floor So we're in discussions with new partners to roll out projects in Iraq, in Turkey, Syria, and Greece. Hopefully in 2020, though, as we all know how this year is going, it might have to get pushed to 2021. But any of your emergency floor designated donations will continue going straight to providing flooring for the most vulnerable people in the world. And I hope that seeing here what we've been able to do with emergency floor shows what a huge impact a well-designed product can have on real human lives. And without your support, there is no natural pathway for these products to exist in this humanitarian space, because organizations are struggling just to have the finances and resources to get by with the status quo. So now we've got some experience, the network and the drive we need to continue this work of emergency floor and start looking at new innovations and new ways that we can impact this humanitarian space and change lives for the better. So finally now, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to another one of my co-founders and our CEO, Scott Key, and he's going to share about the exciting developments in our newest innovation.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I know that, yeah, you could be doing a lot of other things, and I'm so glad to have you here with me and the rest of our team. We shelter not just to solve one problem, to continue to solve problems. We spend a lot of time with family camps, and there's a whole host of problems and issues that we would like to tackle, and that was the purpose of forming Every Shelter. We design and implement life-saving shelter products with and for refugees. That's what they're really unique as a nonprofit. So just to repeat a few of the numbers that we've gone through, next slide, Lauren. There's almost 80 million refugees right now. I like to ask people in the last time that they went camping. Like me, by the end of the weekend, some comfy clothes, but just imagine that you can't leave this setting, that campground, that state park, that wherever you were. But just imagine to stay there for 12 to 17 years. But the equipment, the provisions that you have, it's just a tent. And it's not so different for a lot of these families, right? The provisions that they get are really matched with the durations of time that they're forced to live in these shelters. Next slide. So what we're talking about today is the tarp. A refugee shelter is primarily three components. It's the floor, which, as you know, often goes without. It's the structure that holds up the roof walls and the roof and the legs of a tarp. There's two types of tarps, and I hope that if you want to, in the Q&A, to get as nerdy as you want about the tarp technology that we're looking to replace. But there's two types of tarps. There's the tarp that you see in this slide right now, which was really high technology in the 1950s. This is actually the same material that British soldiers used at the end of World War II. It hasn't changed. 70 years later, this is still the same tarp that refugees are expected to use. Sam and I were in a camp in Iraq years ago, and we were in a camp farm. It was already leaking, and it was only 4 months old, right? And that's a problem, right? These families live here for years with tarps that are only lasting months. The next slide will show the other version of the tarp, which was high technology 70s. This is a plastic woven tarp. This should maybe be what you might get when you go to a home improvement store. It's a woven product, and like you saw in our video, it often fails because of a puncture point that starts to wear. So why is this the case? It's money. It's not a big surprise. A good design then and brings something to the table, not just it's not just a product, right? And so we believe that we found the solution in what you'll see in the next slide, which is maybe not a surprise, a billboard. So just imagine the last time you drove down the road and you saw a billboard. It's got an ad for Coca-Cola, movie that's coming out, but it's printed on a material that's a really heavy-duty tarp, if you look at it one way. It's engineered to withstand years and years of use and abuse. If you imagine a billboard, it doesn't get much more exposed than that, right? And in fact, Engineers have literally spent years developing this technology so that it can withstand that abuse.
This is advertising a car sales event for Kia. It's not particularly humanizing to take this ad and put it over a refugee family's shelter, right? So we have to get rid of it. And this approach that we're showing on the screen is one way that we are working and prototyping, actually have prototyped already, which is to take the ad, cut it into strips, flip and mix the strips, and then cut it into the right size tarps, right? One of the things that's really beautiful about this approach is that we'll actually be able to maintain color on the tarp. It's kind of hard to describe the tangible benefit to doing this. Refugee camps are some of the most dehumanizing places on the planet. And the idea that everyone's shelter can be unique and colorful has really struck a chord with a lot of our NGO partners. In the process, we hope that we're actually able to move the means of production for this product as close as possible to where they're consumed. If we do this well, we'll actually be able to create jobs for a lot of these families. We're a small team, we're a really efficient team, but one of the things that we've developed a really strong capacity is to build teams around our knowledge gaps. And in this case, we have some really incredible shelter partners. Partners that we've developed trust and credibility with over years with our products, with our floors. They have an active and everyday input into the development of this product. But in addition to that, we have a former president of Clear Channel Communication, the world's largest billboard company, 3 different billboard operators, an investment banker who specializes in the out-of-home advertising space, and groups that have started and run processing facilities with us. We have an incredible team behind us to make sure that this concept isn't just a concept, it's actually something that we can scale up and be viable. And so we really see the opportunity here for an impact standpoint as 3 things. We can provide shelter for the most vulnerable families in the world. We can create jobs, and we can take literal tons of waste out of landfills and do something much, much better with it. Every billboard is about 88 pounds of plastic. And so I just want to ground us in where we started. Nicole talked a little bit about this. Sam talked a little bit about it. It'll make sense why I'm going back to our origin story. This is the first floor that we ever created. We were grad students. For a lot of reasons, this isn't a great floor, but it was a launching pad for an idea. It led us to our prototype. Many of you who funded us in Indiegogo in 2015 recognize this image. And it ultimately led to us piloting in Ka, Lebanon with our floors. That pilot was key, right? For the first time, families actually had our floors and were able to say, this is good, this is bad. We improved the design from there, and then we started to grow our impact. At the point of scale, we were actually able to make the right investments so that we could drop the price down. And it leads us to where we are today, which this is a really horrible image in some regards. It's blurry, it's grainy, but it's one of the most humbling images I think that we have of our floors. This is nearly 16,000 of our tiles that are about to be implemented and go to families who need them. And this is what attracts us so much to products, right? When you solve a problem, your ability to scale the solution is immense. And that's what we hope to do with our next project. And where we are right now with that project is prototyping and piloting. And I'm going to introduce Judy Nyquist. Judy Nyquist is one of our board members. Judy's been with us since 2015. And she's been a really huge help teaching us how to start a nonprofit and run a nonprofit. And tonight we're hoping that we can actually raise some funds so that we can take this new concept and advance it to the point where we can actually impact thousands and thousands of families with it. Judy's navigating the unmute button. I can. Okay.
I've unmuted myself.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know that I'm on screen or not, but
You are.
I am. Okay, great. So yes, as Scott mentioned, I am a board member, and it's a huge privilege to be here to represent our board with you tonight. Thank you again for taking the time to learn about this amazing organization and these amazing products. A little bit about why I sort of got involved. Many of you don't know me, but this kind of humanitarian effort is really not in my lane, so to speak. I'm very much in the visual and fine arts realm as a philanthropist in Houston. But when I met Scott and Sam in 2015, I was just amazed by their ambition, their sincerity, their integrity, and their incredible dedication. And most of all, the ingenuity and the innovation that they were seeking in order to find viable solutions. And it really struck me. And I think probably the thing that really sort of sealed it for me is when Scott and Sam told me the amount of time, me being entirely ignorant, a family can remain in a shelter. And, you know, upwards of 15, 16, 20 years, which is an entire, you know, it's an entire generation that grows up knowing nothing else. And it was just shocking to me to think about. And when Scott just spoke about, you know, us going on a camping trip for a weekend, which I personally can't even last a weekend on a camping trip, you know, it's just an intolerable fact for me to think about how these families survive or marginally survive, as we saw in some of the photographs. So really the fact that, you know, the DNA of this company is taking, you know, sustainability and innovation always with an eye to design really struck me, and that's why I'm here. So let's get on to our next project. You see in front of you this shelter that Scott just described with wonderful cladding of repurposed billboards. And it is our intention in the next several months to prototype this and build it here in Houston, the full-scale shelters, so that we can really test it and you know, find the best solutions. So in order to do this, our prototype will cost $10,000. And that is for the foundation. And you can go to the next slide, maybe, so we can see the drawings, the foundation and the structure, and then finally the processing for the cladding of the tarps that you see here. And this will be built with your help in Houston, in the East End. And you see the point here, the pinpoint here. And this property is being very graciously lent by Joe Meppelink and his partner. And it will, and he's provided that space for us to go ahead and build a prototype. So we are ready to go to build there, and we will invite you all to come and celebrate it when it happens. So that first $10,000 is meant to build this to scale and to really use it as a testing ground. After we're finished with this, we will go on to the next part of the project, which, do we have another slide? Which is to actually take our tested shelters and build them in 2 sites, in Mexico and in Lebanon. And I think we have, or maybe a slide of where those are. At any rate, in the Mexican site, we will be building the shelters from scratch. That means the structure and the repurposed tarps. In Lebanon, shelters already exist, and so that we will be providing there the tarps to be replaced onto the shelters for the families. And can we go back one more time so we can see the numbers for what this will cost? Sorry, here we go. So in order to build a full shelter for a migrant family in Mexico, and we are anticipating building 100, $650 a piece. For the full shelter, that means both the structure and the tarps. For the 2 tarps alone that will be repurposed and reprocessed for Syrian refugees, again, for 100 sites, will cost $125 a piece. So this is our next goal, to raise that $90,000 to realize the structures that we are piloting. So here's my, take out your glass, have another cup of wine, and join me in helping us realize this very modest and very important goal. I will say that right before this program, I went on myself to a site and bought a full shelter for one of the Mexican structures, and dedicated to my father for Father's Day. So it's the most unique gift you can give, I think. And I encourage you to do the same. And here are our donation venues, vehicles. You see here everybillboard.org, and then a text to donate with a telephone number, texting billboard, and you'll be referred to the site. So anyway, that's my pitch to you. Please join me. It is probably for me one of the most impactful programs with the least amount of cash than I could ever imagine. And I'm really thrilled that we will be able to build this prototype in the next several months. So yeah. Scott, you want to take it away?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Judy. And yeah, we're so excited to build this in Houston, the prototype in Houston. It gives us the ability to try a lot of different tarps. We're working with a number of different manufacturers to prototype a number of versions. The rainbow tarp is the one that we showed you on the screen, but it'll give us the ability to iterate and improve before we ultimately build the shelters in Mexico. And then we know in the fall, we'll be sending these tarps on to Lebanon to a number of the families that we're familiar with the context greatly. So I hope you guys all have the ability to get online and donate. Please ask us any questions you have. In the meantime, I wanted to open it up to a few of our board members and some of our interns, starting with Juhi, who's coming to intern with us this summer. A little different than we expected with COVID, but she's coming from her house in Dallas. So.
Hi, everyone. My name is Juhi. I'm a rising third-year undergrad at Rice University, and I'm pursuing a bachelor's of architecture. And as Scott said, I am at home in Dallas working remotely. I actually met Scott for the first time last year, which is the end of my freshman year, at a Rice mentorship event hosted by Judy, where we got to talking just about the origins of Every Shelter and the refugee support work that they do. And it was really fascinating for me to hear about this intersection of design and social outreach, and in such a simple and successful way done by a small group of determined people. And ever since, it's really reframed my view of architecture and my role as an architect and kind of the capabilities of the field. And I've been looking to get involved. So I'm super excited to be interning as a corporate research and design intern with Every Shelter this summer. And I'm mainly focusing on our Every Billboard campaign. It's really humbling to be part of such a great team doing great work. And I'm really looking forward to the remainder of the summer.
Thank you so much, Juhi. And now we're going to hear from Katie Chung, who's also one of our interns this summer.
Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Chung, and I'm a Rice Business graduate student in between my first and second year. When I started school last year, I always knew I wanted to work for a company that was making a difference, and I wanted to be a part of a team that was able to move the needle in some way. And after my initial call with Julia, I knew Every Shelter was the embodiment of just that. This summer, I've been working with Scott and Julia on making the Every Billboard idea and dream a reality. To think that we can take an everyday piece of plastic so many of us see in our day-to-day lives and transform it into a shelter that may bring a bit of hope and light into an otherwise really dark situation for many families seemed like a pretty awesome idea to work on. I'm really hopeful and excited for this product and honored to be working on this project.
And Joe is one of our board members, and I'm going to let him introduce himself. But Joe used to be my boss, and now he's one of my board members. So I'm really excited to have him on, if he's on. I believe he's on. We may be having technical issues. Give me 1 second. I think we're going to switch to questions because I think we may be having some technical issues with Joe.
Maybe while they're working on that, we can start addressing a couple of the technical questions while we get Joe let up. I saw someone ask if it is tax deductible, if your donations are tax deductible, and they are. So even though we're talking about developing products which can kind of take your mind to a business for-profit mindset, we are a nonprofit. So we are not in this to generate revenue. We're in this to research and design new products and get them to the humanitarian space. So your donations, yes, we are a registered 501c3 and they are tax deductible. Another person asked, will this be available for others to watch later? And yes, we will be sending out a recording of this to everyone who is on the email, and we can put it and make it available anywhere. You can share it forward if you have other people that you know missed out on the call who would like to be learning about this. That is also available. We have a few more questions we'll get to, but I think Joe is now, I don't think you're going to see him, I'm not sure, but you'll at least be able to hear him, one of our board members, Joe. So I'll turn it over to you, Joe.
Okay, can you hear me?
And see you, that's great.
And see me, all right, cool. Can everybody see my shirt? I don't see my own video. Maybe that's latent.
That's a nice shirt.
All right, okay, good. Hey, so thanks, Scott, Julia, Lauren, Sam, Judy, my fellow board member. Really appreciate you guys doing this, and I really can't think of a better way to spend my Saturday on my living room floor. So I'm always really impressed and feel so big-hearted when I hear y'all talk about the work you're doing and show the slides of the impact you're having. It's just incredible to see the real impact that can be achieved through empathic design. And I'm going to circle back to that term here in just a minute. Right after I step into the Wayback Machine and tell you how I met Scott. Scott mentioned that he used to work at our office. All true. Scott was, and Scott is always very modest. Scott was our director of product design at our little company here in Houston, MetaLab, and he did just fantastic work. Every one of our clients loved him, and he had a big impact on the projects that he worked on. I met Scott though probably in about 2014. Scott and Sam were in a course, taking a course through the Rice Building Workshop, as it was then known, Rice Building Workshop, and I was on their jury. And they continued that effort into an independent study, and at which time they asked me to be kind of a mentor and an ongoing advisor to them. And they were concerned in that effort with creating an innovation that would improve the lives of refugee shelters. And as so many students often do who have immense talent and energy, as Scott and Sam still do, they kind of designed a Swiss Army knife, a solution that would check a lot of boxes and do a lot of things. And what they did and what they learned through that process, and they had a really pivotal moment where they went to an event in New Orleans that was it was a refugee shelter type event, or a USAID event. And they went there to listen and learn, to hear what that world really needed. And listen and learn they did. And what they came back with was that that world didn't need or wasn't ready for yet at that time for an entire new shelter. They needed a floor. And somebody got really excited about this floor that they had. And they showed you the image of that earlier. And they doggedly pursued something as simple and seemingly mundane as a floor. They pursued this floor to the point of real resolution and real impact, as you could see in so many of those slides. And that's just an incredible thing to see happen over that period of time. And that's where, this is where I want to get back to this idea of really listening and learning. And this is something that I think is so topical right now, especially for us as architects and designers, to apply empathy in our work, to really carefully listen and learn from the problems and the issues that are surrounding you. And we are sadly not lacking in issues that surround us. But what Scott and his team are focusing on is such an important and vital issue that affects so many people in this world, 1 every 2 seconds. So I hope that you will jump on, buy a couple of t-shirts like I do, so I can wear one at least once a week. So important to kind of let people know what we're doing here, and support this effort. I cannot think of a better group of people to drive this home and to get these next innovations done. But that empathic design, that listening and learning, the curiosity, if you wonder how they come up with these ideas, they've been there. Scott's been to Lebanon. He's been to Syria. He's been to these refugee camps along the northern Mexico border. They are there on the ground, listening and learning. And that's where good design really happens. That's where the impact is made. So please support this effort. And I look forward to seeing you in the East End when this shelter prototype is done. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Joe. We really appreciate all of our board members. We have a very active board and are just thankful for their input and advice in what we do. We know that as a small startup of just a few people, it's really important to surround ourselves with lots of knowledgeable board members and NGO partners, and that's something that's really important to us. I know we are pushing the end of the time that we said we would take from your evening, so we are really thankful that you have spent this hour with us. We do still have a few questions lingering in our Q&A box, so we're planning to stay on here at least for a few more minutes to answer those. If you need to drop off, don't worry. We will still be recording this, so you can check that out later. But if you have a few more minutes, hopefully we can be brief here in our answers and wrap this up quickly. But you're also welcome to stay. I'll just let you know some of the questions we're going to be addressing here, so you can get an idea of what we're going to talk about. We had one person asking about some of the challenges that come up culturally in implementing our designs in different cultural contexts. We'll also address a little bit about why people are actually spending all this time in shelters instead of being moved into more permanent housing solutions. And another one, what is the biggest challenge for the billboard project outside of funding? And the last one, talking about when the shelter prototype will be built in East Houston. So just to give you an overview, those are the 4 questions. If you have any more, please feel free to still stick them in the Q&A box. That we'll answer. I'm going to go ahead and take the first one, and then I'll tag Julia in to answer some of these, about why people spend so much time in shelters. We wish that we could just say, yeah, they're only there for a few days and then they get sent on to a more permanent solution. A lot of these people are displaced even within their own countries, and it's an ongoing protracted crisis. They're not able to return home. It's not safe for them to return home, no matter how much they long to and want to. And most of, Julia, maybe one of you can tag me in, with the report that was just released by UNHCR 2 days ago, it's even increased how many developing countries, the poorest countries in the world, are hosting the vast majority of the world's displaced people and refugees. So we're not talking refugees coming to America or coming to developed countries. We're talking about countries that are already really poor and don't have the cash and don't have the funding to really be able to integrate. Like in Lebanon, of a population of 4 million, there's 1 million refugees. So we're talking a huge percentage of the population. So people, because of protracted crises and because of the situations of the host countries where they're ending up, this is a very simple answer to a complex question. But anyways, that's why we're saying, you know, permanent solutions are not quickly available, no matter how much we want them to be. So it's really important to find ways that this generation who is in protracted crisis doesn't get lost in that gap. And you know, they need a stable home so that they can be educated and live and thrive, so that in the future, hopefully when they can return to a stable situation, it's actually a functioning society that can handle moving forward and can handle taking their country forward. I also wanted to, let's see, we'll talk quickly maybe, Julia, about the cultural context of what are some of the challenges we face. And then I'm going to let Scott handle the specifics about when the prototype will be built and some of the biggest challenges for the Billboard project. So Julia, if you want to answer about the cultural challenges.
Sure, thank you, Nicole. And also, I think the stat you were looking for, it's about 70 to 85% of displaced persons are now in low to middle income countries. So you're talking about very impoverished countries that create parallel systems for their refugees. And so the option to even integrate into the local economy or even to be hosted in permanent structures isn't there, just because it's seen as too political and too risky. So we received a question here that says, what are some of the challenges that come about implementing the design solutions presented in different cultural contexts? How do you address this? And I'll say that one of the first things you think of when you are in humanitarian aid is you do not want to be an outsider coming in and saying that you have the right solution. You don't want to come in and say, we can tell you exactly what you need, because like any family, only you really understand your real dynamics, right? You can say, this is what my family needs the best, better than anyone else that could come by and look in and hypothesize about what your family might need. And so we really like to lead from the bottom up. We use a process of human-centered design, which means at every single point of our design process, we are engaging not only the end user, the refugee or the displaced person themselves, but also other critical stakeholders like aid agencies and the government, because we want to ensure that what we build alongside the refugee population that we're getting feedback from is also sustainable and viable in that response and in that context. And so it's truly an iterative design process. We believe in not necessarily like recreating the wheel, but mostly our changes end up being very strategic, incremental improvements that can make a world of difference. So when it comes to understanding different cultural contexts, we really rely on our refugees and our monitoring and evaluation processes, which are asking questions, they're hosting interviews, they're engaging in workshops to really help guide us to what is appropriate. I believe that answers your question. This question is actually from Takudzwa, who is one of our interns from last year, who did a great job in developing a market access platform for us. So thank you again, Takudzwa, for joining in.
All right, thanks, Julia. I'll let Scott jump in here and answer a couple of the technical questions about the upcoming Billboard shelter prototype.
Yeah, so one of the questions was, any idea when the shelter prototype will be built in East Houston? We hope July. COVID seems to throw us a wrench often. Houston's spiking again, but I think we're gonna have it in place in July. We're working with a company out of Ohio and a few companies here in Houston to actually prototype the tarp. So the structure of it becomes essentially our laboratory, where we can reskin the structure over and over again to make sure that we get the product just right. And then one of the questions that was asked was, if I want my donation to be used for the prototype, how do I let you know? Any donation that we receive tonight through the text or the everybillboard.org will go to the prototype. So we're ultimately seeking to raise $100,000 over the next 3-4 months, and you know, prototyping is first. So any donation that comes in tonight will definitely go to building that prototype. And I would love to host you out there safely with masks and 6 feet apart and all that, but we'd love you to come and see it.
I think our final question of the night that's come through is, let's see, what do you see as the biggest challenge for this project, Scott, outside of funding?
Yeah, it's you know, it's hard. It's always hard to predict what the ultimate biggest challenge of a project are going to be. You know, we're fairly confident at this point that we're going to be able to solve the technical problems. How do you get rid of the ad itself? We feel really good about the prototypes that we're developing currently. This is a hard industry to change. They've, you know, like we've said a few times, they've been using the same technology since the 1950s and the 1970s. And so think of it as a really huge ship that's really hard to steer. In this case, with the Billboard project, we actually hope to generate a revenue stream from the advertisers and the billboard operators themselves. So if we do this right, we'll actually have a great product, a product that lasts years and not months, but then also a product that's free to the NGOs to implement. So we hope that that will be really the winning combination, because when you ask NGOs to buy things or support financially, it's a really tough proposition. So whatever we can do as an organization to find money that typically doesn't come to refugees, and we can bring it into that space to help families, it's a really great thing to do. Just because it's Q&A and I think there's only 23 people left, we think we have the opportunity to generate a funding stream from, for example, Anheuser-Busch. Anheuser-Busch, they make beer, right? They own a number of craft beers and big beer brands, but as a company, they might not care much about refugees, right? But they are very concerned about their ecological footprint. And so because this project is actually recycling something that they use a lot of, billboards, they care, right? And we think that they'll ultimately help us fund this project. And so I really love that synthesis of something that is so out of the refugee aid space, but actually being able to bring it back so that we can actually provide this product hopefully free to these implementing partners that we work with.
All right. Well, I'm looking at the Q&A box here. I don't see any more outstanding questions. If you do, of course, if we've missed something, I know there might still be some rolling in. Our email, you feel free to email us, contact@everyshelter.org. You can always reach out, even just our first name with everyshelter.org if you have any questions directed particularly to any of us here. Thank you so much for your time. As I'm sitting here, I'm distracted looking at so many great feedback coming in through the chat, through the Q&A. Just thank you for sticking around with us, for all this engagement. We'll certainly be following up if there's any remaining questions out there. But thank you so much for your time. If there's any closing announcements, I'm going to let Lauren or Scott jump in. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up here. Lauren's got to share her computer screen here with
Yeah,
Scott, so.
you know, it's one of those things. Thank you guys so much for being here, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your Saturday night. And again, if you do have any other questions, email us at info@everyshelter.org. All right, thank you so much.